Hi everybody and welcome to this video. Um, we've all played games from time to time which are particularly difficult losses, and um, chess has its own way of breaking our heart sometimes. And this was one of those games. Everything was going well for me. I had pretty much a dream position at one point, and yet a moment of loss of concentration, and I threw away my advantage and my opponent ended up winning the game. So this is the first time I've been able to bring myself to look at the game. So let's just fly through the opening part of the game pretty quickly. Um, it's a Ruy Lopez. This is all pretty standard stuff. If you're a Ruy Lopez player, you'll be familiar with most of these moves, or all of them. So he played the bishop c5 system. Rook to e1, just defending the pawn on e4 now. Bishop to b7, so in this system black can get both of these bishops raking down, and the bishops on adjacent diagonals, this can be particularly powerful if the board opens up. So I played c3, just preparing to break in the center with d4, a fairly thematic idea. My opponent played d6, just solidifying his center, and now d4. So he leaves the tension in the center just by bringing the bishop back to b6, which is a reasonable approach. And now I just played my bishop to g5 and just getting a pin here and putting a little bit of tension in on his position. Nothing that he should have to worry about too much. It's not that I think I'm going to be a win material from this, but I'm just hoping to provoke a few weaknesses. And so it turned out that I was able to provoke weaknesses with this move, because he immediately followed up with h6, and after bishop h4, g5, and bishop g3. So this is what I've considered to be the first fairly critical moment in the game. I've just highlighted some of the squares here. You can see he's got some weakened color complexes in his pawn structure. So there's a hole on f5 and h5. The f6 and g7 squares are weakened because they're not supported by pawns either. And also this c6 square is weak. So white has got much the better pawn structure here. But black does enjoy a little bit of a space advantage, and he might be able to generate something of an attacking initiative over here on the king's side if I'm not careful. So here my opponent played the move knight to h5, and obviously this is well, not obviously, but it's a blunder, because the queen is indirectly attacking the knight on h5, and I was able to exploit this. At first I didn't see it, and I was thinking, oh well, I'm going to have to give up my dark squared bishop, which I wasn't pleased about. But then I thought, well, I might be going to get some counterplay on these weakened light squares. But then I realized that there was a tactic available. So here, after a minute or two of calculation, I found a tactic. So you might want to just pause the video here and see if you can calculate a few variations that win material for white. Okay, so the move I found here was knight takes e5, revealing the attack on the knight, and also putting some pressure on f7, where I'd be forking the queen and rook, and also putting some pressure on this c6 square. So I calculated that if he just captured here, I would capture on h5, and if he captured on g3, I would recapture on c6 or f7. it's good enough to know that you are creating some threats. You know, it's not that important to find the very best line, as long as you know that one of the each of the line, at least one line, is better than what your opponent has. So here the best reply for black is d takes e5. We would have something like queen takes h5, queen to e7, d5, just closing the center for the bishop, and then knight to a5 and bishop c2, and white should be able to win comfortably from this position. But my opponent blundered here and played the move knight takes g3. So now it's time to consider which is better, knight takes c6 or knight takes f7. Just take a minute to think about this, and then I'll present my ideas. So first let's look at knight takes c6. We'll just walk through it. So knight takes c6, and it's hitting the queen, so black really would have to capture with bishop takes c6, and then we would have h takes g3. It's better to capture with the h pawn here because of the potential pressure of this bishop, and opening this square would just be asking for trouble. So that would be a nice position. That would be a nice position for white if it happened. So let's just take a quick look at that. So knight takes, bishop takes, and h takes g3, and white has much the better of it with this very nice pawn center. Okay, but knight takes f7 is just stronger. It's going to win the exchange, and the knight would still be hanging down here. So my opponent plays queen to f6, and as you can see, there's a danger in the position that if things open up, the f2 square is a vulnerability. But I underestimated this, and it ended up costing me dearly. I played here knight takes h8, which is the strongest move according to Rybka. And at this point I did my calculations, and after taking on h8, I visited the restroom. I'd been drinking quite a few cups of coffee earlier in the day, so I took the opportunity just to use the facilities. And when I strolled back, I was very alarmed to see that my opponent had captured with the knight on d4. So kudos to my opponent, because he found this move, which really wasn't that strong of a move, but he gave me the opportunity to go wrong here. And all good swindlers in the game of chess will find ways to complicate things and look for an element of surprise. And this tactic worked to my opponent's credit, and I ended up throwing away the position with a horrible blunder. And I underestimated my opponent based on the strength of his earlier play in the game. So here I played the move h takes g3, and it occurred to me that my opponent may have been banking on me playing f takes g, which would pave the way for a discovered check with knight takes b3 check. I would have to move the king, and then he would have knight from b3 taking the rook on a1, and I would be in a world of hurt. But I thought that he'd simply overlooked h takes g3. So without doing the proper calculations and considering the ramifications, I looked briefly at c takes d, but that I was concerned about knight takes e4, because I wanted to recapture this knight, but I should have looked at it more carefully. So you should just pause the video now and see if you can figure out what happens after h takes g3. Alright, so after h takes g3, knight takes b3 is, even though there's no discovered check, black is still setting up the threat of knight takes a1 and queen takes f2, or sorry, bishop takes f2 check, picking up the rook. So it really just thrown away my advantage here. The correct way to respond would have been c takes d4, and after bishop takes d4, just queen to c2, defending the b2 pawn and the f2 pawn. And if black plays, for instance, bishop takes b2, he's not going to lose the rook because of this nice idea of e5. And after bishop takes e5, the bishop would have been pinned, and I could just follow up now by capturing this knight. So I ended up losing the game anyway in just 5 or 10 more moves. I resigned in disgust. So that was a rough one. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.